The boardroom doors opened at 9:15, and Treasure Davis walked in 2 steps ahead of Junyu, her hand loose in his, her heels hitting the floor like she'd done this 100 times before. She hadn't. She just didn't let it show. Bryce sat at the far end of the table, a pen between 2 fingers, a folder open in front of him he wasn't reading. He looked up when the door opened, because everyone looked up. Then he saw her face, and the pen slipped, rolled off the folder, and dropped onto the carpet. He didn't pick it up. Nobody else noticed. The man next to him kept talking about square footage. A woman across the table typed something into her laptop without looking up. Bryce stared at Treasure's hand, in Junyu's hand, like he was trying to do math that wouldn't add up. 2 years ago, Bryce told her she wasn't built for rooms like this one. Now she was sitting in the second chair from the head of the table, and the man who said it couldn't make his mouth work enough to say good morning. Treasure sat down, crossed her legs, and reached for the water glass already placed at her seat. She didn't look at him. She didn't need to. Now, dearies, if this story has you hooked already, let me know in the comments. Be sure to like and subscribe if you're enjoying it, and share your thoughts below. I always enjoy reading what you have to say. 6 weeks before that morning, on a Tuesday, Treasure was on recess duty, sitting on the low brick wall outside the cafeteria, grading spelling tests with a red pen clipped to the clipboard. Kids ran past her in loose, screaming clusters. She marked a 9 out of 10 on Daquan's paper and circled the word necessary because he'd written it with 1 S again. The text came in while she had the clipboard balanced on her knee. I don't think this works anymore. I think you know that too. I'm sorry. I really am. 4 sentences. No call before it. No call after it. She read it twice. She put the phone face down on the wall next to her, picked the red pen back up, and finished grading the stack. Her hand wasn't steady, but she kept her letters small and neat, the way she taught her students to do when they were nervous about a test. A girl named Keisha ran past and yelled her name, just to yell it, the way 7-year-olds do, and Treasure said, "I see you, go on," without looking up, because that was the job. And the job didn't stop because her life just had. She didn't cry until she got to her car that evening, in the Publix parking lot off 12th Avenue, the engine still off, both hands on the wheel. She let herself do it for exactly as long as it took a man 2 cars down to finish loading groceries into his trunk. Then she wiped her face with the heel of her hand, checked the mirror, and went inside to buy chicken and rice like a person whose life hadn't just changed in 4 sentences. By Thursday, half the school knew. Not because she told anyone. Bryce worked at a firm 2 miles from the school, and Miami was the kind of city where everybody's cousin worked with everybody else's ex. The front office secretary, a heavy-set woman named Yolanda, who ran the copier like she owned stock in it, pulled Treasure aside near the mailboxes and just said, "I heard. You good?" Treasure said she was fine. She wasn't asked twice, because something in her face told people not to ask. What she didn't know yet, what she wouldn't know for another 2 weeks, was that Bryce wasn't just gone. He was already photographed at a rooftop bar on Betrayal, with a woman from his firm's marketing floor, his hand on the small of her back, both of them laughing for a camera that wasn't even pointed at them. The photo made its way to Treasure through a co-worker's phone at lunch, slid across the table, face up, like evidence, with the words, "You need to see this," attached to it. Treasure looked at the photo for 3 seconds. Then she slid the phone back across the table, picked her fork back up, and kept eating. The fundraiser gala happened 9 days after the breakup, at a hotel ballroom downtown, with a string quartet nobody was listening to and a silent auction table covered in donated gift baskets nobody wanted. Treasure wore a fitted ivory dress, second-hand, but tailored, and worked the room with a clipboard she didn't need but used anyway, because a clipboard gave her hands something to do. She was 3 sentences into pitching a tech company rep on funding new classroom tablets when a server bumped a tray and red wine sloshed onto a white tablecloth 2 feet from her. The man standing near it apologized to the tablecloth like it had feelings, out loud, in full sentences. Treasure laughed before she meant to. He turned around, saw her laughing, and looked relieved, like the laugh meant the wine didn't matter anymore. He had a quiet way of standing, hands in his pockets, like he was used to taking up less space than he actually could. He asked her what the tablets were for, and she told him, and he asked a second question that proved he'd actually listened to the first answer. Most donors didn't do that. He laughed at her joke about underfunded schools a half-second late, like he was running it through some internal translation first, and that delay made her trust him more, not less. She didn't catch his full name over the quartet and the noise. She called him Tablecloth Guy in her head, and didn't bother correcting it when he introduced himself properly, because by then they were already 3 topics deep into something that wasn't really about tablets anymore. His name was Park Jun-yu. She wouldn't learn what that name actually meant for another 3 weeks. He found the school 2 days later, said he wanted to fund a literacy initiative. The donation was real, the paperwork was real, but Treasure clocked the timing the second he walked into the front office, asking specifically for her by name. She met him outside by the bike rack after the buses pulled out, arms crossed, not unkind, just direct. "You didn't come here for the kids." He didn't argue. "No, I didn't." "Then don't tell people you did." "I won't again." That was the whole conversation. It was enough. They started seeing each other the regular way. Coffee that turned into dinner, a walk on the boardwalk, where he kept stopping to ask what certain Spanish words on storefronts meant, and she kept telling him half-right answers, just to see if he'd notice. He noticed every time. He started writing down the corrections in a notes app on his phone, like vocabulary homework, and showed her the list once, unprompted, like it was nothing, like it wasn't actually the most romantic thing anyone had done for her in years. He showed up 40 minutes late one night because of a call with his office in Seoul that ran over. He didn't make an assistant text her an excuse. He called her himself from his car in the restaurant parking lot, walked in, still apologizing, and pulled her chair out before he even sat down in his own. Her godmother, a sharp-tongued woman named Odessa, who'd raised Treasure from age 11, demanded to meet him within the first month. She sat him at her kitchen table, put a plate of fried plantain in front of him without asking if he wanted any, and interrogated him for 45 minutes about his intentions, his family, his job, and whether he'd ever been arrested. He answered every question straight, ate 2 helpings, and asked for the recipe before he left. Odessa told Treasure afterward, stirring a pot with her back turned, "That one's not playing games with you." Treasure didn't argue. What Treasure didn't know was that Park Jun-yu wasn't just a generous donor with good manners. He was the reason 3 Miami waterfront developers had been fighting over meeting slots for the past 2 months. He ran an investment group based out of Seoul with enough capital behind it to make or break a mid-size firm's entire year. She found out the regular way people find out things in the age of phones. Not from him, but from a co-worker shoving a tablet screen across the break room table during lunch, a Forbes headline glowing under the fluorescent lights, his face in the photo wearing the same quiet half-smile he'd worn apologizing to a tablecloth. Treasure stared at the screen for a long moment. Then she picked her phone up off the table and texted him one line. "We need to talk. Tonight." Hit subscribe if you've ever found out something huge about someone you trusted from a stranger instead of from them, because Treasure's about to ask Jun-yu the question that decides if this thing is even real. He came to her apartment that night, still in his work clothes, tie loosened, like he'd left straight from wherever he'd been the second she texted. Treasure had the Forbes article pulled up on her own phone, laid flat on the kitchen counter between them, like evidence at a trial. You let me think you were just a guy who spilled wine on a tablecloth. I am that guy. You're also apparently worth more than my entire school district's budget. He didn't try to soften it. Yes. She turned away from him toward the sink, hands flat on the counter edge. Why didn't you tell me? Because for the first time in I don't know how long, somebody was choosing to spend time with me, and it had nothing to do with what I was worth. He said it plain, no drama in his voice, just tired honesty. I didn't want that to stop. That's not your call to make, that's mine. You took that choice away from me the second you let me find out from a magazine instead of from you. He didn't apologize right away, and that was the right move, because an apology too fast would have sounded like management instead of truth. He let the silence sit. Then he said, "You're right. I should have told you the second night, at the boardwalk. I was a coward about it. I'm sorry." She didn't forgive him on the spot. She told him to leave, and he left, and he didn't call the next day, or the day after, which told her something too, that he respected the space, instead of trying to talk his way back into it. It took 5 days. She called him first. They met at a diner near her school, not anywhere fancy, plastic booths and laminated menus, because she wanted to see if he'd still show up to something small, now that the truth was out in the open. He showed up early, already sitting in a booth, no driver waiting outside, no security visible, just a guy in a t-shirt reading a menu he clearly didn't need. She slid into the booth across from him. "I'm still mad. Okay? I'm staying mad for a while. Okay? Order me the pancakes." He laughed, the real kind, not the polite kind, and ordered the pancakes. That was how trust came back, not in one big gesture, but in small, repeated ones. He started introducing her to people by her actual title, teacher, before anything else, even at events where that title meant nothing to the room. He learned her students' names from the stories she told. He never once tried to fix her financial situation with money, because he understood, without her having to explain it twice, that she'd walk away the second it felt like a transaction. 3 weeks after the diner, at a small dinner with 2 of his colleagues visiting from Seoul, one of them mentioned a deal they were finalizing, a waterfront development bid in Miami, 2 firms still in the running. He said the name of one of them out loud, like it meant nothing, Whitfield Hale. Treasure's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. She set it down slow, careful, like the table might notice if she moved too fast. Junyu caught it instantly. He didn't ask in front of his colleagues. He waited until they left, until it was just the 2 of them and the dishes, and then he asked, quiet, direct. "What was that? At dinner?" She told him. All of it. The breakup over text during recess duty, the photo on Betrayal, the comment about not being built for where he was going. She watched something shift behind his eyes while she talked. Not jealousy, something colder and more contained. The look of a man recalculating a decision he hadn't made yet. "I'll pull the firm from consideration," he said. "No, you won't." "Treasure, no." She said it sharp enough that he stopped. "You evaluate that deal on whatever it's actually worth, with whoever you've got doing that evaluation, and you don't tell them why or why not. I'm not going to be the reason 100 people lose work because one of them was cruel to me." He looked at her for a long moment, something close to disbelief mixed with something closer to love, like he was watching a kind of strength he genuinely hadn't met before. "Most people in your position would want me to bury him. Most people aren't me." The evaluation went forward exactly the way Treasure asked. Clean, separate from her, run by a team in Junyu's group who didn't know her name and didn't need to. 2 firms, 2 proposals, real numbers on a real spreadsheet. Whitfield Hale's proposal came back stronger on paper, tighter margins, better community impact projections. Junyu read the report twice before he believed it wasn't rigged in anyone's favor, because some small part of him had been braced to find a reason to throw the whole thing out anyway. Bryce, on his end, had no idea any of this was happening around him. He was a director, not a decision-maker, close enough to the deal to take credit for momentum, far enough from the top to never see who was actually evaluating it. He told people at the office the deal was basically his, that he'd built the relationship with the investment group personally, which wasn't true, but nobody above him was checking that hard yet. His new relationship was moving fast, in the kind of way that looks good in photos and feels hollow in private. His fiancée was the founder's daughter, a fact that had nothing to do with looks and everything to do with positioning. Bryce had read the room 2 years into his career and understood exactly which relationship would move him faster than merit alone. Treasure had been collateral in that calculation, not cruelty exactly, just ambition wearing cruelty's clothes. Word came down that Whitfield Hale won the bid on a Thursday afternoon. The office erupted into the kind of forced celebration that happens when everyone needs the win to mean something personal. Bryce stood in the middle of it, shaking hands, soaking in congratulations for a deal he hadn't actually closed, riding a high that had nothing real underneath it. 2 nights later, Junyu took Treasure to her godmother's house for dinner, the same kitchen table, the same sharp-tongued woman, now setting out 3 plates instead of 2, like it was nothing new. After dinner, on the porch, with the smell of fried plantain still in the air and the streetlight buzzing overhead, Junyu got down on one knee without any of the production people expect from men with his kind of money. No ring-box theatrics, no hidden photographer, just him, on the porch steps, holding her hand like it was the only thing he'd ever actually wanted to hold. "I don't have a big speech," he said. "I just know I don't want to keep building a life and have you not be in the next room when I get home to it." Odessa, watching through the screen door, said loud enough for both of them to hear, "Say yes, so I can go to bed. This porch light's drawing bugs." Treasure laughed, said yes, cried a little, and didn't bother wiping her face before he kissed her, because for once, she didn't need to look composed for anybody. The signing for the Whitfield Hale deal was scheduled for the following week, the same week as the engagement, pure coincidence, the kind of overlap real life produces without asking anyone's permission. Treasure was invited as Junyu's guest, not as anyone's enemy, not as anyone's revenge plan, just as the woman he was about to marry standing next to him on a day that mattered to his work. Nobody on the Whitfield Hale side knew she was coming. Bryce certainly didn't know who his firm's silent capital was about to marry. That Thursday morning, in a conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows looking out over the bay, the boardroom doors opened at 9:15. Bryce sat through the rest of the meeting without hearing most of it. Numbers got read out loud, hands got shaken, a junior associate slid paperwork across the table for signatures, and Bryce signed where he was told to sign, his handwriting smaller and shakier than it usually was. He kept glancing down the table at Treasure, who never once looked back at him, who kept her attention on Junyu or on the documents in front of her, like Bryce wasn't even in the room. When the meeting broke, people stood, shook hands again, made the kind of small talk people make after a deal closes. Bryce hung back near the window, waiting for an opening, and when Treasure stepped out into the hallway alone to take a call from her godmother, he followed. "Treasure." She turned, phone still in her hand, and looked at him the way you'd look at a coworker you barely remembered, polite and distant. "Bryce, can we talk? Just for a second." "About what?" He didn't actually have an answer ready. He'd spent 2 months assuming this deal closed because of his own hustle, his own relationships, and standing here now, watching the woman he'd discarded walk out of that room, engaged to the man who actually controlled the capital. Something in his chest was rearranging itself, in real time. "I didn't know," he said, "about you and him. Nobody told me, nobody owed you that. I want you to know I'm sorry for how I did things, the text, all of it." She studied him for a second, not coldly, just clear-eyed, like she was looking at a stranger's old photograph, and trying to remember why it used to matter. I already got what I needed from this, Bryce. I don't need anything else from you. Not an apology, not an explanation. I'm good. You're really good. Look at you. I always was. You just couldn't see it from where you were standing. She walked back into the conference room before he could say anything else, and that was the whole conversation. No shouting, no scene, nothing for anyone in the hallway to gossip about later. It hit harder for being quiet. 2 weeks after the signing, the founder's daughter, Bryce's fiancée, sat in her father's office going through paperwork for the wedding venue deposit when she found something that had nothing to do with weddings at all. An internal email chain, forwarded by accident into a shared drive, showed Bryce taking credit in writing for a relationship with Junyu's investment group that he'd never actually built. He'd implied, in 3 separate messages to senior partners, that he had a personal connection to the decision-makers, a connection that got the deal moving. It was a lie clean enough to survive casual scrutiny and dirty enough to collapse the second anyone checked. She brought it to her father that same afternoon. The firm's internal review moved fast once it started, the way these things do once the right person is paying attention. 2 junior associates confirmed, under direct questioning, that Bryce had asked them to leave certain names off certain reports. A timeline got built. The timeline didn't favor him. He was let go on a Tuesday, escorted out with a box of his desk items by a security guard who'd been congratulating him on the engagement 3 weeks earlier. The engagement didn't survive the firing by more than a few days. Not because his fiancée found out about Treasure, not because of any leftover feelings, but because the version of Bryce she'd agreed to marry, the connected rising star, had turned out to be mostly a performance, and she didn't want the man underneath the performance. Treasure heard about all of it secondhand, the same way she'd heard about the breakup itself, the same way she'd heard about the rooftop bar photo, through a coworker, sliding a phone across a break room table, this time without even needing to say, "You need to see this." She read the headline, set the phone down, didn't smile, didn't gloat, didn't feel the satisfaction she might have expected to feel a year earlier when she pictured this exact kind of justice happening to him. What she felt instead was something quieter, confirmation, the sense of finally understanding a math problem she'd been staring at for months. He hadn't left her because she wasn't enough. He'd left her because she had no strategic value to a man who measured every relationship by what it could move forward. The breakup had never been about her at all. It had been about him the whole time, and she'd spent weeks grieving something that was never really about her in the first place. That night, she told Junyu about it over dinner, plain, no anger in it anymore. He got fired, engagements off. How do you feel? She thought about it honestly before answering, because he always asked questions that deserved honest answers. Lighter, not happy, just lighter. He nodded, didn't push for more, reached across the table and took her hand the way he had the very first night at the gala, before either of them knew what the other one was worth, back when all that mattered was a wine-stained tablecloth and a joke that landed half a second late. Wedding planning happened the way real planning happens, not in some glossy montage, but in arguments over guest lists at the kitchen table, Odessa vetoing a caterer because she didn't trust a kitchen she hadn't personally inspected, Junyu learning the word auntie applied to at least 11 women who weren't actually related to Treasure by blood. He took notes on that too. Treasure kept teaching through all of it. She didn't quit her job when the engagement made local business pages, didn't quit when a reporter from a Miami outlet asked for a comment about the schoolteacher who's marrying a billionaire, a headline she found embarrassing and refused to dignify with an interview. She showed up every morning at 7:15, graded papers at her desk during lunch, sat through a parent conference about a kid struggling with reading comprehension, with the same patience she'd always had, because the size of her bank account hadn't changed the size of her commitment to that classroom. Junyu restructured part of his foundation's giving around her input, not as a gesture, but because she actually knew where the money needed to go, and he'd learned, slowly, to trust people who'd done the work he hadn't. 6 months after the signing, after the engagement, after Bryce's name had mostly stopped meaning anything to either of them, Treasure stood in her classroom on a Friday afternoon, helping a boy named Tyrell sound out the word necessary. 1C, not 2, she reminded him gently, same as always, while the rest of the class packed up their bags for the weekend. Outside, in the parent pickup lane, a car pulled up without a driver in it, just Junyu, behind the wheel, sleeves rolled up, waiting the way he always waited now. No entourage, no assistant calling ahead, just him. Tyrell looked out the window and said, "Miss Davis, is that your husband?" "Not yet," she said. "Couple months. He drives himself." "He does now." She walked the boy to the carpool line, made sure he found his mother's car, then walked over to Junyu's, climbed in, and let her bag drop into the back seat with the kind of tired satisfaction that comes from a full day of real work. "Good day?" he asked. Tyrell finally got necessary right. Only took him a month. "That's a win. Everything's a win if you're patient enough to wait for it." He pulled out of the parking lot, and she rolled the window down, let the Miami air in. The wedding happened on a Saturday in late fall. Small by the standards of people with Junyu's kind of money, big by the standards of the neighborhood Treasure grew up in. Folding chairs lined a backyard 2 blocks from the school. Strung with lights, Odessa insisted on hanging herself off a ladder nobody could talk her down from. Half the guest list was teachers. The other half didn't know what to do with the unmarked black cars parked along the curb, but nobody asked questions, because asking questions wasn't the culture of that block. Treasure wore a dress she'd picked herself. No stylist, no consultant, just her and a seamstress 2 streets over who'd been altering clothes in that neighborhood for 30 years. Odessa walked her partway down the aisle, stopped halfway, and handed her off the rest of the way alone, because Treasure had told her months earlier, plain and firm, that she wasn't being given away by anybody. She was just choosing to keep walking towards something good. Junyu stood at the end of that aisle, the same way he'd stood at the gala 2 years earlier, hands loose, not performing, just present. When she reached him, he didn't say anything clever or rehearsed. He just looked at her, like the rest of the yard had gone quiet on its own, without anyone asking it to. During the reception, a kid from her class, not Tyrell, a different one, a girl named Keisha, the same one who used to yell Treasure's name running past the brick wall during recess, walked up to Treasure in the middle of the dance floor and asked, loud enough for half the yard to hear, "Miss Davis, are you rich now?" Treasure crouched down to her level, fixed the bow that had slipped in the girl's hair, and said, "I was always rich, baby. I just got a little richer." The girl didn't fully understand it, ran off to get cake, and Treasure stood back up, laughing, catching Junyu's eye across the yard, where he stood half listening to one of Odessa's church friends explain something about the Holy Spirit and good cooking in the same breath. Bryce's name never came up that night, not once. Not in a toast, not in a quiet aside, not even in Treasure's own head, when she had a spare moment alone, refilling her drink near the folding table. He'd become exactly what he deserved to become in her story. Nothing. A man who once told her she wasn't built for certain rooms, watching from somewhere far outside this one, while she stood in the middle of a yard full of people who loved her, married to a man who never once needed her to prove she belonged anywhere. Later that night, after the lights came down and the chairs got folded and stacked against the fence, Treasure sat on the back porch steps in her wedding dress, shoes off, feet bare in the grass, Junyu beside her with his tie undone, both of them too tired and too happy to move yet. "You ever think about how we met?" she asked. "The tablecloth." "The tablecloth," she said, laughing. "You apologized to a piece of fabric like it had feelings." I was nervous. You were terrible at flirting. I'm better now. You're all right now, she said, leaning her head against his shoulder. All right's good enough for me. Somewhere behind them, in the dark kitchen, Odessa was already running water for dishes nobody asked her to wash, humming something low and tuneless, the porch light buzzing overhead the same way it had the night he proposed, drawing the same bugs, lighting the same small piece of the world that had turned out, against every odd either of them had been handed, to be exactly enough. If this story stayed with you the way it stayed with me writing it, that's the whole point. Some people don't need rescuing, they just need someone who's finally willing to keep up. Like this video, if Treasure earned every bit of her happy ending, drop a comment telling me which moment hit hardest, and subscribe, because there's another story coming, and I think you're going to love it just as much.